Right. How is this for you guys? Perfect, not static or anything? All right. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. This was kind of fun. It was a lot of work, people putting this together. Wow. Every time I walked in this building, there was some new thing I saw that I said, I got to tell everybody about this. How many, I've been coming here for a very long time. So if it doesn't matter if you didn't come to my previous talk about 2 months ago, in that talk, we talked about what was Branford like leading up to the building of the library and how it happened that Branford, which was a pretty rural community in 1890, got what the press called a temple on the hill. Now, this makes me laugh a little because I don't know what hill they're talking about. It's really a bump in the land, is it not? So I'll just call it a Branford-sized hill. But tonight, what we're going to do is go on an architectural tour of both the exterior and interior of the building, the descriptions, the materials, the layout of the library. I'll be showing you a lot of pictures. Some of them I won't have much to say because I'm going to let the pictures, the photographs sort of speak for themselves. But I think normally I take questions at the end. I think I'd like to make this a little more interactive. If you have a question on a certain photo, or maybe I forgot to say something that you've noticed, don't yell, but say something and we'll discuss that. There's just every photo. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff going on. So just for a little recap, is the population of Branford. Well, Jenna, we're not going anywhere here. All right. Maybe that would be annoying if I have to do this. Should we end the show and try it again? Okay. It's better turn off, turn back on again. Yeah, all right, let me go out and it's working a moment ago. There we go. Okay. Little stuff there. All right. So again, the population of Branford in 1890 was about 4,500 people. And the immigration from Ireland had started in the 1850s. So that was really well underway. The Scandinavian countries, most of those folks were already here. And very soon after 1890, within a decade, the East Europeans and Italians from Europe were starting to come. And so Branford was now a real melting pot of people from all different nations. And the development of the shoreline was well underway since the Civil War. All the shoreline areas were developed with hundreds of cottages, primarily because the railroad was put through in 1852. And after the Civil War, Branford entered its version of the industrial age. There was people coming by train to Branford to live here and to work at the Malibu Iron Fittings Company on the river or the Branford Block Works. And with all these new people from all different nations speaking different languages, there was a need and a recognition of social services like schools, police departments, fire department, including a public library, which was a growing national movement. And so in 1890, a committee was formed, spearheaded by the businessmen in Branford, to formulate a plan to build a public library in Branford and raise funds. And this was not an easy task. There was an economic downturn in the 1890s, and it took a lot of money to, even if it was a more modest building, to collect that kind of money. So they approached native sons of Branford that had moved on elsewhere. For example, Henry Plant, who grew up in Branford, moved to Florida. Hello. And became one of 3 primary people that developed all of Florida. He became very, very wealthy, but he declined to help with the library. But it was Timothy Beach Blackstone of Chicago who was made the recommendation to help with our library. He was born in Branford. He considered it and accepted the request. He was born in Branford in 1829. He was the youngest child of James Blackstone and his wife, Sarah Beach. And Timothy decided farming was not for him. He moved eventually to Chicago and became chief engineer of the Chicago Railroad. And then within a decade, president of the Alton Railroad, one of the largest in the country. And in addition to that, he was the first president of the Chicago stockyards, where all that activity and economic growth was happening. At the time of his death in 1900, he was worth $6 million, which today would be $187 million. And his wife was Isabella Norton of Norwich, but both her parents were born in Branford. One, Henry Norton, and her mother was a Frisbee, a name you might recognize from Branford. They had no children. And so Timothy decided to build the Blackstone Library at his own expense as a donation to his native town and in honor of his father, who you see here, who had just died 4 years previously at the age of 93. And James Blackstone was born in 1793. He was a farmer. He was captain of the state militia. He was in the War of 1812, Justice of the Peace, state senator. You can see he was a very capable man. And people from all over the shoreline came to Branford to see him, to seek counsel and advice. But by financing the library, Timothy Blackstone got to say what happened. He oversaw and decided on almost every aspect of the library, the site, the materials, the architect, the design. He even selected books and, of course, approved almost every detail. This is the site he chose that we're on today, a little triangle between Cedar Street, Main Street, and Laurel Street. And you could see there was a lot going on this triangle before the library was here. He chose this site because it was up, not a hill, but I call it a little knoll. And it took 3 years to both design the library, and there were many different owners of these properties, and he had to buy them all out and clear the land. The very left little point of that triangle is, of course, where the library is today. Blackstone considered several architects, but he decided on Solon Spencer Beeman of Chicago, who he, of course, was familiar with. He wanted the library to be grand, tasteful, substantial, fireproof, because there had been some bad fires in the nation, and he wanted it to benefit all the residents of Branford, summer residents, children, and so on. Beeman had studied in Europe classical design and particularly library architecture, so he was well suited for this task. He designed buildings for George Pullman in the village that Pullman designed, the Columbian Exposition, churches, commercial buildings, the Chicago train station, the main library in Chicago, and many private homes. Blackstone and Beeman chose the Probst Construction Company of Chicago to build the library, and this company is still in existence today. The architect Beeman designed the building. He designed all the interior components and came to Branford often, same with the Hammer family. And he personally designed all the woodwork, all the carvings, and all the furniture. We do not know, however, who made all the woodwork and all the furniture. Did the Probst Construction Company do it? Did they contract it out? We simply don't know. So 3 years later, construction of the library began in 1893, and it would take 3 more years. You can see why, there was no engines, no steam engines, all just manpower, horses, pulleys, scaffolding, 3 years to complete. And we are fortunate to have an essay by Beeman of a couple pages that he wrote when the library was dedicated in 1896, describing some of the architectural features. And so this obviously is Google Maps from above, and you can see that the library was very purposely set in this particular spot in the side of the triangle, leaving all that green space that sort of slopes down a little bit. So that little knoll is taken full advantage of. And just in this picture, you can see it the best. Look at the general shape of the building from the top. And the library doesn't face straight onto Main Street, does it? It's just a little bit askew. And of course, that was done on purpose. And this sort of softens the approach, I think. Rather, it would be kind of blunt if you just like, and I want you to really look in this slide at the dome, because this is a good picture of the dome. It was called graceful. It's not overwhelming on the library, I don't think. And then you can really see in this picture the copper crest that's at the top. And I also want you to look at the roof line and all the ornamentation. We'll be talking about that in a minute. And so that approach that I was telling you about is particularly evident when you come from the center of Branford to the library, and the way it's sided. I think you really appreciate the architecture instead of just seeing the stairs and the entryway right away. It sort of brings you around. And I think Beeman did this as a way of making a statement, and I think it makes very much a statement. And he designed this building in the Greek Ionic style, sometimes called the Ionic order. It was patterned after the Erechtheion on the Acropolis in Athens, and he considered it the purest of all the Greek designs. The library has an overall design of a Latin cross. Remember from that Google picture, you could see that it's sort of shaped as a cross. It has two wings that are lower than the rest of the building, and that dome that we already spoke about. The outer dimensions of the library are 129 by 162 feet. This photograph, and many of you will remember the St. Mary's Church that burned in the 1974, I think. They took this picture from the steeple. There were no drones back then. So the architect Beeman chose Tennessee marble for the entire building, both exterior and interior. And it's really, I didn't know this, it's really limestone. It's not marble at all. We always call it Tennessee marble, but when it's polished, it looks like marble. So I'm going to continue with calling it marble. It has a little pinkish gray tone to it, but it has very little veining, which I think would have not looked good on the library if they had a lot of veining. And many large buildings at this time were made of Tennessee marble, the Grand Central Station, the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., just to name a couple. And the quarry the stone is still being quarried in Tennessee. And in 1994, when the library was remodeled, they needed a few pieces for their renovation, and they were able to obtain it from that quarry, or one of the quarries down there. And so we're going to talk about this. The east and west wings are identical in shape, in their format and so on. This is the east side. They're curved, and I say lower than the rest of the top of the building. This is a little closer view, a modern view of this. The previous one was the 1930s. And again, look here at the dome, but also the ornamentation on the roof line. And so the entire roof line is decorated with these finials. And these are acanthus leaf designs in all different shapes and slightly different designs. And the acanthus leaf was stylized by the Greeks in their architecture along roofs, columns, walls, and so on. And I think I read that it's really poppy or some sort of drug, but. And so this leaf design is everywhere in this library, in marble, in wood, outside and inside, and we'll be seeing more of it. These are the windows on the wings, and I never noticed this before. They're really quite different. On your left, all the way over to the left toward the stairway, that window is really kind of plain, isn't it? You see this one right here? It just has a little kind of plain sill and a little lintel over it. And then the ones on the far right, again, have a little bit more going on. There's these sort of flat, almost column-like decorations around them. And then some of them have this really, I think, pretty highly decorated. This is a pediment, a Greek pediment, and then the scrolls underneath. And what do you see on the scrolls? the acanthus leaf. So I never, you know, again, a lot of this I'm seeing for the first time when I was taking these close-up pictures. So again, the acanthus leaf on the scroll, it almost looks like the scroll is keeping the pediment up, but it's decorative. And then it's stylized below the scroll also of that acanthus leaf. And then we come to the principal feature of the library, which is the main entrance. And so again, Beeman had a start. We come around the corner perhaps, or if we're walking and we come to the front of the building and we're down below, and it really like leads you up, doesn't it? It wants you, it makes you look at what's in front of you. You start at the ground level. There's 11 marble steps, 2 large landings, and they're 39 feet in width. And those stairs on both sides are framed by these blocks, cheek blocks they're called, on 2 different levels, and they're really pretty large. The upper block is 44 by 60, and the lower one 44 by 92. And all along the edge of these blocks, you'll see that design, which is called egg and dart design. You've heard of that perhaps. And I think this is a pretty nice view of it. This stuff is everywhere in this library and on all the moldings. It was a very common thing. Yep, you'll look around in here, we'll talk about it as we move along. Really quite beautiful, both in marble and in wood, all around this library. And above the stairs and the columns is called the colonnade. There's a frieze, which is the part of the section above the column. And this is the roof line, which is a Greek pediment, similar to the windows we just saw. And you can see the roof line, the very peak of the pediment with that nice design on the roof, with the windows letting in some light and some columns that just make it sort of more decorative with also the designs. And perhaps your favorite are the columns. I know they are many people's favorites. It's really the main feature of the entranceway. There's 4 Greek Ionic columns. And so in Greek classical architecture, there's Doric. You've heard all these Doric, which would be plain. It's pretty plain. The column, a little decorative, but the capital, the very top, is quite plain. In our case, we have an Ionic column, which the capital has the scroll. Ours are quite fancily carved. And then the most fancy would be the Corinthian, as you see on the right. The columns here are 20 feet high, and this is a good view. You can see the base. All these little components, columns have names. But briefly, the bottom is the base, the top is the capital, and the capital has all different little descriptions. The shaft of our columns are fluted instead of smooth. And that, I think, makes it fancier, don't you? It makes it much more decorative. If those were smooth, it perhaps would be a little bit boring. At the top, we have, again, all this Greek Ionic architecture. And the scroll part itself is called a volute. And tell me what's going on here. A lot of stuff that's going on, right? We've got egg and dart everywhere at the very top, around the column, even little egg and dart in those little scrolls behind the larger scroll. And then, of course, in the middle, we have our leaves, our acanthus leaves, with also there's a little fur. I think it looks like a fleur-de-lis pattern between the acanthus leaves. We don't know who carved these. We assumed it was perhaps an immigrant carver that worked at the quarry in Tennessee, like so many of the quarrymen that worked in Stony Creek. And there would be a handful at these quarries of master carvers, but we don't know who. And then to the left and right of the 4 columns are these 4 piers, and these are hefty. They're holding up holding up the building. And there's, again, these piers will peer inside, as will the design on the piers. And I'm very fond of the design on these piers. I think it's really, really good looking. I'm quite intrigued by it. And then behind the columns and the stairs is a deeply recessed, it's called a loggia, which is just below the pediment that you just saw. And a loggia is a open space that's covered, and it's part of the main building, usually runs across the entire front of the building, in this case, the entire front of the stairway. And a loggia has columns or arches, whereas a porch or veranda don't tend to. So there's this kind of little bit of difference. Now, all the stairs are marble, the columns, the walls behind these men that are posing for the picture, the ceiling and the floor of the loggia are all marble. And then on each side of the door are two pretty fancy bronze lights. They're original to the library. And we'll be talking about more about those lights when we go inside, but you'll notice on the top, what do we have? We have our leaf decoration, and then we also have kind of a scroll that matches all the windows. All this is very planned out by Beeman. And above the main door and all the doors inside the library is a lintel that is carved. It's a little hard to see, but you see there's two layers of the egg and dart. There's decoration on the very top, and then the scrolls again to sort of match those windows. You'll see that here. The underneath of these lintels is called a soffit. And then those transom windows above the door lets in light, and those originally had metal work. I guess we don't have metal work in here, but there's metal work in the reading room, and there used to be metal work on this window that matched that. And I never paid attention that a lot in the library is a coffered ceiling. I just really, well, I'm 5'1" and now I'm 5 foot. And short people don't tend to look up. So, I'm really noticing sort of this detail for the first time, you know, as I walked around, and it's really in a lot of places in the library, but this is in the loggia, the coffered ceiling. And then the pictures, the original pictures only showed the metal door, but we think they just hadn't put the wood door on yet. And this is just some detail of the wooden door, the front door, but all the doors match in interior of the library. Here we have, for the first time, the rosette is introduced, this time in wood, but they're all over the library. You can see in back here on the framing of the door of the auditorium. And I call it a rosette. It almost looks a little like a sunburst or perhaps a sunflower. And then our egg and dart design around all the edges of the doors and the panels of the doors. So for example, this is a panel of the front door with the egg and dart. And here's a close-up of that rosette, which is also around all the doors in marble also. And then all the hardware in the library was made by the Branford Lock Works. We do have a receipt for that. And that was a huge operation, nationally known. They made everything from plain ceramic doorknobs to very fancy. This is not particularly fancy. I don't think Beeman wanted the door hardware to distract from the rest of it. So this is relatively plain, but I think it's quite charming, this handle with, of course, the leaf on the below and the above and the egg and dart around it. And then this is the hinge that holds the doors up in all the interior doors. One side of it is 4 by 10 inches. So you can see it really is very large when they're open to their full extent. Does everyone know where the Branford Lock Works was? There's only a couple buildings left. Donovan's Reef, for example, is one of the old buildings that still exists from the Branford Lock Works. It was on both sides of Main Street, both on that side and also all of Sabea Avenue was all the Branford Lock Works. And it got bought out by Yale in Town, which is still making locks today. And then they moved the Branford operation to Stanford in 1911. And then once you open the wood doors, you come to these bronze doors. You see what I mean? That metal work and that light was there originally, which I hadn't noticed previously. And there's those two beautiful lamps that are still there. And so we're going to talk about this door. This is a pretty nice view of it. This is from the inside. It's a devil of a thing to get a photograph of because the vestibule just beyond this is a little on the dark side, but this is how it looks today. The doors are pure bronze and they weigh almost 2,000 pounds. Each panel is 35 by 106 inches. And they were designed by William Fitzroy Smith. And he sent a little essay when the library was dedicated, just telling what he had in mind with these doors. So this is a mystical design with Greek and Roman motifs. And we're fortunate to have his notes. So at the very bottom are stylized lion's paws sitting on Mother Earth. And this indicates in his words strength and stability. There's an owl in the center, which of course, since ancient times has meant wisdom. And then the lion paws support this pillar, and near the top of the pillar, there's these two medallions to the left and right that you can see. At the top of the pillar is this ram's head. And then at the very top, hopefully you can see it, is a flame denoting eternal life. And the artist summarized the doors in this way, that learning inspires our lives and serve as a beacon to be passed on to future generations. You can see in the door is the rosettes, but this time in metal. And so behind the metal doors is a small vestibule, all in marble. And all that we've talked about so far, starting at the street level, we've then drawn up, haven't we, with all this architecture, and we're walking up the stairs and we're ready to be presented, let us say. And ta-da! However, it's really hard to take a picture of this to really show how unbelievable it is. So the rotunda was obviously meant to be the most impressive space inside the library, and it's the central feature of the building. It's octagon, 45 feet in diameter, and all the other rooms, including where we are tonight, radiates off that rotunda. I'm sure many of you remember when the rotunda was filled with wooden bookcases from floor to ceiling and the card catalog, and in 1994, those were all removed so that the rotunda really is presented the way Beeman wanted it to be. You can barely see it, but you can see here, again, I did not notice this before, that coffered ceiling goes around the whole edge of the rotunda in the octagon shape. You can see it a little bit to your left. And this is a good shot. We'll be talking about the second floor, but it really shows you the whole presence above the piers of the entablature. And this is a good, we'll be talking about the dental molding, which is introduced here in the rotunda. So as you come in the front of the rotunda, to the east and the west were the wings that we saw from the outside. To the east or the right is the reading room. It's always been called the reading room. To the west it's been varyingly called the book stacks or just the stacks. In more recent times, the reference room. And then there's two small other rooms to the right, which is now the Branford room. And then kind of straight ahead to our left as you come into the auditorium was, until 1994, the head librarian's office. So that was called the librarian's room. That's now called the hammer room. And so on both levels of the library are these tile floors. They're made of marble. They were specially designed in Paris, and they cover 12,000 square feet of floor space. This is not like tiles we have today where you have some big sheet, all individually placed. and they're not very large. I would say they're a little over a quarter inch each, between a quarter and a half inch each. We do not know who in Paris, what company designed them. We don't know who made them. We don't know who laid the floors, which I think is too bad. And this is the design all around the edges of the, so for example, in the rotunda in an octagon shape, the tile floor around the edge. And you can tell me, of course, what this is. It's everywhere. The acanthus leaf with then that stylized leaf in between. And then the rotunda has 8 of these piers, almost identical to the ones that we saw outside, and they really hold up this building. They're made of marble, there's steel beams inside all the pillars and columns in the inside of the building. There's a lot of weight coming down onto these piers, and they're pretty massive. Take a look at them more closely every time you come to the library. And of course, as you know, that the rotunda is open. All this allows the rotunda to be open all the way to the roof. Now, I said we talk about the lights. There's 300 bronze light fixtures in the library, slightly different designs. There's a few different designs. They were all made by the Bradley and Hubbard Company of Meriden, Connecticut. And what we don't know is, were they stock items? I suspect they were specially designed for the library based on Beeman's dimensions and prerequisites. And these lights had gotten pretty dirty after 100 years. And in 1994, these were all painstakingly taken down and cleaned, and they're really, really beautiful. I'll show you that, some of that detail and how good they look. They were gas and electric when the library first was opened. So they must have been obviously converted to all electric somewhere along the line. And then some of the features, all the doorways inside also, you'll recognize this from the outside. All the doors have this lintel above it. And here again is the acanthus leaf. And then below the agate dart, we have the rosettes all around the framing of the door. Another layer of agate dart, and then we have the same scrolls with the leaf design to match the windows, to match all the doorways. Everything really does match and coordinated. And this light below this door used to have the ironwork too. So let's go now. We're gonna, as we go in the front door, we're gonna turn right, and the east wing is the reading room. I mentioned this was always called the reading room. It's what it is today. This is how it looked. And you can see it's got like a palm tree thing going on there. That was very popular that in the 1890s to have like palm trees around your house. And here again is this furniture that Beeman designed, especially for the library, all the chairs, all the tables. None of this is around anymore. It got modernized through the years. And I'm just seeing now, looking at this, I think these are rosettes on the tops of the legs on all these tables to match. Just poking, just behind that chandelier is the portrait of James Blackstone, which we'll see again in a moment. This is a little side view of the reading room. And here you can see that iron grill work that I was talking about. All the vents were designed in metal by made by Bradley and Hubbard based on Beeman's designs. And they're all still around the library to hide heating vents. And this is now looking from the reading room out, going back to the rotunda. And you'll notice just on the left, there's a clock. That's a Seth Thomas clock. It's very large. Have you ever noticed them? They're pretty large. I mean, would you say 2 feet in diameter at least? There's one still there in the reading room. It's never moved. And there's one in the book stack room above the office in there. It's never moved. They both still work. And here's a modern day, the central feature of the reading room is, of course, the fireplace. The portrait of James Blackstone is by J. Colin Forbes of Toronto. And he also painted a portrait of Timothy Blackstone, which is now over the fireplace in the Lucy Hammer room, formerly the librarian's room. And just take a look, we'll talk about this again, the frame around that portrait, and we'll look at some more detail and a little bit as we go upstairs. It matches the upstairs gold gilt up there. And I think interestingly, you notice the windows, it's almost kind of arts and crafts looking, isn't it? It doesn't look Greek Ionic at all to me. And wider at the bottom and thinner at the top, and then with the crested with that molding, you'll see the two rosettes at the top. And I think this really, it makes the building, the room rather, appear taller than it is by having that perspective. And then you'll see all around the library, the agate dark around the edge. And this is a close-up of the fireplace. Again, some stylized rosettes, but there's some new features that were added on the fireplace. We have the rosette in a larger form, but then these sort of fleur-de-lises decorating on each side. And I think you'll see, I think they're in here somewhere. Yeah, they're in this room and in a few other places. And then in the reading room and also in the stack room, there's a variety of the columns and the piers, which we've already talked about in marble, but there's also these other, in this case, columns, which are smoother rather than fluted, and they're painted in this gold gild, and there's two sets of them in each room. So 4 altogether in the reading room, 4 in the stack room, and they're not marble at all, they're wood, and they're plastered to look like marble. And so the piers in the reading room, the stack room are the same. They're wood, they painted them gold to sort of differentiate them, but the decoration is in wood this time instead of marble, but painted the same design as you've been seeing, but again, they're wood and plastered over. And this process, which has been known since, ancient times, is called scoliola. And it's a money-saving technique. I mean, after spending all that money, I guess they had to save some money. So you really can't tell the difference from afar, but if you look really closely, even on this pier, see how like it's a little flaking? And if you go up to a couple of those columns, you'll see there's little cracks. So you can kind of tell that it's not marble. There is a still beam through the middle. So these still are supporting columns and piers. And then we talked about the west wing, which was called the book stacks or just the stacks, and more recently the reference room. And this is really not changed at all. There's now some bookshelves in this floor space that you're seeing, but again, all designed by Beeman, all the metalwork, the columns, and so on. And this is how the stacks have always looked, with this metalwork done by Bradley and Hubbard of Meriden. And the metal is an iron product, but it's not wrought iron. It doesn't rust. And so it's never rusted. It's been here over 100 years now, 125 years. And see the scoliola columns that we spoke of before and the piers behind it. And then to the right of this photo would be another set of those. So those are in this room also.
Okay.
Yes.
This is also one of my favorite sections. Do you think this is all custom, or was this kind of style?
No, I think this was all custom, because here again, I'm going to show you a close-up of this in a moment, but we have the rosettes that match all along this edge. This is my favorite space, actually. I mean, I love all that ornateness, but there's just something about this that appeals to me very much. And so the railing, again, these are bronze, and the balustrades are bronze, and the railing is mahogany, and they match the stairway right outside the auditorium here. And here's a close-up of that metal work that you spoke of, with some scroll design underneath and those rosettes. And I'm, like I say, I'm quite fond of that detail. And then we're going to head into this room, which is a lot easier. We can all look around, but these doorways lead into the auditorium. And as you can see, they're identical to the front doors with that rosette, fancy rosette design that was on the fireplace with all those wooden rosettes all around the trim. And then the panels on the bottom are the egg and dart edge. So again, not super elaborate, but there's some stuff going on here that makes them very decorative, I think. Most of the wood in this building was antique white oak, so it's really held up well through the years. And again, Branford Lockworks doorknob or door handle. And here's a view of the auditorium when the auditorium first opened. Again, chairs designed by Beeman. They don't look very comfortable, but nonetheless, people were hardier back then, I think. And these were gone. I don't think I ever remember. Does anyone remember these chairs? I think they've been long gone in our lifetimes. But yeah, a few years ago, a member of the Noble family had one of these chairs for decades and donated it back to the library, and that's on display upstairs. So you can get a close-up view of that. Yeah, no, please don't, you probably. So this was originally called the lecture hall. You know, we would call it, it's always had the same purpose, but they called it the lecture hall. And yes. The ceiling, I just think because it's black and white, that it looks darker than maybe it really was, but I don't know that I know what the original color was. Just go back to see. I think this next picture will show it better. And so the circular stage is set into this sort of elliptical ceiling that you see here, which is a little different than this ceiling. It's really, I think, really quite beautiful. Here's a close-up of that elliptical ceiling. This was just painted recently. I think they finally finished. This ceiling has had problems through the years because the roof is leaked, and so it impacted the panels. Were they once green, or I forget what color they were, but this is a more recent, since 1994, that they've had to redo these panels. So the auditorium is 40 by 50 feet, and it's a height of 16 feet. The wood from floor to ceiling is 16 feet. And then this is called a circular niche. And then there's the rooms, they're called retiring rooms on the left and the right, so that if you're a musician, for example, you can retire to the side to blow the stuff out of your clarinet or whatever you have to do. There's been, you know, and the day after the library was dedicated, there was lectures. And so I would guess thousands of lectures, music venues, readings, poetry readings, meetings. Now they play bridge, all manner of activities. The auditorium has these 12 large windows. They let in a lot of light, and then you've already looked around and seen the brass fixtures. And then instead of the metal vents here all around us are these wood decorated vents, original to the building. And introduced here because mostly it was a music venue. We have this decorative wood carved up in the in front here, I believe. We have some of that around. A little different decorative elements here in the auditorium depicting various scenes. There's another cleft, music cleft, and then again, look at all the detail, that dental molding, the lintel with the scrolls, and then even up above, we have all the egg and dart, 3 layers of it, rosettes. It's a lot of stuff going on in this auditorium. And we talked a little bit of the ceiling is elliptical, it's plaster, so it's painted. And since the beginning of the auditorium, I assume they did it purposely. Musicians through the years, it says that it has superior acoustics. So I assume that Beedman did that on purpose, and he had hired somebody very specifically or knew himself how to design an auditorium so that it could augment the sound. Just a close-up of what we've been looking at here of the woodwork. Again, some master carver did this. This is antique white oak. And then in the back, we have wooden pillars, columns, instead of with the same similar kind of designs, but in wood this time. So now we're seeing the balcony was originally built for people to view in the auditorium. I suspect when the library first was open, they did that. It hasn't really worked for that purpose. It's a kind of an odd space, so it's been a little of this and that through the years. And then here again, the coffered ceiling, all in wood with the egg and dart design around it. It's really beautiful, that ceiling, as we leave the auditorium. Let me take a drink of water. Any questions before we go up to the second floor, or comments? Or
what was the original floor?
let's go back and see. Let's see. I didn't really pay attention. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Just wood, probably, yeah. You know, there's just what you're seeing is about the only interior photos there are. Very few, and very, you know, not that many even during the construction. We maybe have 24 at the most. So to answer your question, I don't know.
Was there any documentation that has been destroyed, or?
I mean, we assume there was tons of paperwork that Beeman had. You know, receipts and bills paid. We have some, which is how we knew Branford Lock Works did the locks, and Bradley and Hubbard from Meriden. Bradley and Hubbard was a big company. I don't know if you've heard of them. They made quasi sort of Tiffany lamps, for example, in addition to all these custom ironwork. So it was a big firm. We know some of the smaller laborers from Branford, for example, the Enquist family did some of the heating and the furnace work, but a lot is missing, I'm sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one point about the stonework, which you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The new addition, was faced with Indiana limestone. So,
With Tennessee? Or,
Tennessee.
yeah, Tennessee. Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah. So everyone heard that in the new entrance just from 3 years ago, they matched the Tennessee marble in order to make that consistent with the rest of the building.
So the quarry is still.
Yeah, the quarry's still going, yeah. All right, so let's go upstairs. You can see here that the stairs, all the floors, all the trim, and the walls themselves, which is quite high as we go up these back stairs, are all that Tennessee limestone polished. And here again, the railing matches the stack room with the mahogany railings and the bronze balustrades. And on the second floor, the space is octagonal so that it's consistent with the rotunda up above. And as you look up, this is sort of what you see. It has rooms coming off of it, just like the rotunda, and has 8 of these marble arches with these medallions in between. Now the medallions there's 8 of them between these 8 arches, and they're New England authors. One being Harriet Beecher Stowe and the other men of that time. Let's see what we can talk about here. So again, over around the arches, we have the scroll, which matches the windows, the egg and dart around the arches, but this time instead of linear, it's curved around the arches. And the balustrades, which are the railings, are all, of course, marble. Now, these paintings, including the paintings in the dome, which we'll see momentarily, were painted by Oliver Denton Grover. And if you haven't seen it, there was a professor whose specialty is about this painter from Chicago. And is that online? You can view that lecture online where he talks about the artist. Again, his name is Oliver Denton Grover with a G. He talks about the things he did in Chicago and the paintings here at the library. And here again, the thing I really didn't ever pay attention to are these coffered ceilings. This is the arches even have this sort of coffered ceiling around those 8 arches with the scroll. You can see sort of that egg dart around the edge above all those arches. And this is, again, a wonderful construction picture. And I think it shows really kind of best from the rotunda. You can see the tops of the piers, and that from the tops of the piers to the railing where that man is foolishly standing is, and again, I don't know, did they use, like, you know how they do today, you have a big harness on you, and did they use that? You know, I don't know what the safety features were. So that balustrade is all of marble, but I think this is a good view that shows above the piers is the entablature. And then there's components of the entablature. One is the frieze, which is that flat part, and sometimes friezes can be carved. In this case, they're pretty plain. And then above that is called dental molding for obvious reasons. You can see here that the frames for the medallion paintings are here, but the paintings aren't here yet. And the dome is marble on the outside, but it's made of concrete. And then they bricked it and then plastered it. So here you can see that the inside of the dome is brick and then plastered over, but the outside of the dome all the way up to the top is marble.
Those frames are marble?
The frames are marble. Yeah. And then the jewel, I think, is the dome itself. And all the way, I laid on the floor and I didn't need somebody to get me up to try to take a picture down here all the way up. But my picture, this is a picture by a former librarian here. He took some, you're seeing some of his pictures, Jason's pictures. Very nice picture. It's a hard thing to get because of the lighting. You don't always get the right lighting. I love the glass light, don't you? I just love it. So delicate looking. And if you look really closely at the light, acanthus leaf in every little section, and then the center is the rosette. I think it's fantastic. And then below that is, I'll show a close-up of that green circle around the light, and then of course the paintings, which we'll see. And then right below the paintings, this is a good angle to see more dental molding that matches then underneath that balustrade. And so the paintings, there's 8 paintings by the artist Oliver Denton Grover, and they depict the history of or the evolution of bookmaking. And so each panel has that evolution. And again, I'm not going to talk about the art because you can go online and see that lecture. But I do want to talk about the framing of this art. And this framing around the art is the ribs of the dome in plaster and painted to look like, you know, gold that's gilded. And that, I'm not sure if you would call it wheat sheaths or ropes of garland. I'm not sure what that would be called, but it matches exactly the frame around James Blackstone and Timothy Blackstone's portraits. And then again, we have acanthus leaves within the frame, and around each painting is the egg and dart. And these paintings were really dirty, if you remember, back 30 years ago, and were completely cleaned. They did it with scaffolding, Jen. I think yeah, as I recall, they had scaffolding all the way up in the dome, all around, with master restorers cleaning that. And they're really very beautiful, but now that that color is all brought out. But they had darkened. I mean, it was 100 years. Again, they're wider at the bottom and thinner at the top to match the dome, but it also visually makes you look up, doesn't it? So people asked actually in that online lecture, did somebody on a scaffold paint these like Michelangelo at the Sistine Chapel? And no, these were painted in a studio, you know, by the artist, and all the prep work done. And then the paintings brought up to and placed within these frames. So they were not painted in situ up on the dome. They were painted, you know, in a studio and then brought to the space. And then this is a close-up that I wanted to show you of just below the dome top, between the portraits and the glass eye, is this sort of decorative thing. And it is in here somewhere, this exact same design is in a couple places in this room, which is nowhere else except I think in here and up in the dome. So again, you're now familiar with, again, would somebody be able to tell me what this molding is called? I'm not sure. It's a sheath of wheat, a rope of garland, but then of course the egg and dart and a tiny little acanthus leaf in the corner. Laurel leaf, maybe, yeah. Right. Could be. I think on the lower part of this picture, I think the carving, you can really see the carving of the egg and dart, how precise that is, and it really is carved pretty deep. All right, any thoughts before we go downstairs, or questions or things that you wanted to ask more about? All right, well, let's go backstairs, not if you are afraid of heights. I failed to say before that the stairs, and we can talk about it because we're going down, are freestanding. They're not supported. They're supported what's called the arch principle. So the stairs themselves into the wall, kind of like a spiral staircase, they're freestanding on one end, which is, I think, very interesting and quite beautiful. And so I just would like to do some sort of final thoughts. Again, just to summarize, the library began in 1890. The planning stage took 3 years to prepare the site and complete the architectural details. I mean, think about the vastness of what this was, to do all that and to design this building and get it approved by Timothy Blackstone. I'm sure there were many different meetings to get these approval. And then it took 3 years to build, for good reason, of course. It's a big building. It cost $300,000 to build. And you can't even calculate that now, because it probably would be impossible to build it. And then Timothy Blackstone and his wife in their wills left another $300,000 in addition as an endowment. And that endowment is still being invested and used for the library. It no longer totally supports the library, but it still, you know, does help. It did support the library totally without town funds till the 1960s. The library was dedicated June 17th, 1896, and our library received national attention, particularly for the architecture that you saw today. And Timothy Blackstone died only 4 years later. He only saw the finished product once. He didn't come to the dedication because he did not want his presence to take away from the presence of what he had done. He lived nowhere near as long as his father. He died at the age of 69 of pneumonia. But his wife lived another 20-some years, and she had this library built in Timothy's honor, you'll recognize it. It's in Chicago, and it's sort of a mini version of our library. I've not been to Chicago. It's on my bucket list, but you'll see, yeah, you're looking at it, aren't you? The columns, the acanthus leaves and the finials, the balustrade on the top of the building matches our rotunda. So the columns, the stairway, it's just sort of a smaller version of what we have here today. And this is still exists. It's still a public library, part of the Chicago public library system. I've got to get there soon because I need to really look inside. There's a few pictures online, but there's not great pictures out there. And so I'll just, I had fun, yes.
I wondered if any of the Stony Creek quarrymen ever worked on the library. There's so much stonework and so much.
Yeah, we just don't know. I mean, doesn't it make sense? Her question is, did they hire some Stony Creek quarrymen to do some of the carving here? I suspect all the carving was done in Tennessee because that's how they did it in Stony Creek. So when they had a big project in Stony Creek, they had several sheds where the master carvers did the work, and then the product got shipped out. It wasn't done on site. So that's my guess, but I don't know. And so just my final thoughts. So since 1896, we are finishing now the celebration of 125 years of this library. It's been depicted on dozens. I'm just bought on eBay 2 Blackstone Library postcards I didn't have, and I have like 35 of them. So I'm thrilled. I'm paying too much, but I'm buying them. This library's been photographed. It's not the easiest thing to photograph because it's so large. It's been painted by artists. People have had their picture taken on the front steps when they come to visit. But for me, I think it remains a marvel, really, that somehow Branford had the good fortune to receive such a gift. And so when you come to the library, which I hope is often, don't just take your book out, walk around, have a look. If you have guests come from out of town, come and peruse, because there's a lot here, and I think you'll enjoy it even more now. Thanks. Right, well, any more questions or comments or, yes?
In one shot, someplace here, struck with a gin hole set up on top, like a chair.
Yes, yeah.
I see that here?
Yes, there was one construction photo where they kind of showed that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what do you call it?
Gin hole. or-
G-I-N?
Yeah.
Okay. But again, there was no, in 1890 steam, there was no steam machinery on this job site. It was all, yeah, like at the quarry in Stony Creek, they had the derricks and the horse, there's pictures of the horses, horsepower. There was trains, so that marble all came up by train, was all marked and carved and numbered in Tennessee before it came up here. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me that they were able to build such a structure.
I had a little derrick in the front at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Show.
Right.
Derrick, like a very.
I think, the dome is like 70 feet high. So there was a special crew that built the dome. Again, he worked for the construction company. I forget his name. I talked about it in the last talk I did. And he had a special crew of 11 people that I'm sure that man who was the superintendent of building the dome, he had picked certain people, yes.
You commented on the gentleman who was
Yeah.
standing out there, the dome, and how was it foolishly, you said,
Right.
standing there. But I wonder during this whole process, was anyone ever severely hurt with
Yeah.
injuries or safety issues?
Right. Her comment was anyone hurt? To our knowledge, we know of no one. I'm sure they were bumped and bruised and had a block of stone fall on their feet. But one of the problems, which is why we don't know as much as we'd like to know, is there was a gap in the 1890s of no local Branford newspaper. And had there been a newspaper in Branford during that time, every little detail of this building would have been recorded. by the local newspaper. And so New Haven, it wasn't as important to them, and there might be a little mention here or there. So it's too bad we're really lacking that. To my knowledge, there was no fatality, no, one severely hurt, or they hid it if it was. Yeah, yes, in the back. Your question is what was done by Branford Lockworks? Yes, in this library, to our knowledge, all the window and door hardware. So hinges, doorknobs. I think a couple of these, like the lever on this door is more modern. But if you look around, you can see that all the hinges were Branford Lockworks, as is that front handle. Yeah.
You had a shot of the library from the air, and you can see.
Yes, yeah. The one from St. Mary's Steeple.
Right,
Yeah.
When they built this new entrance down there, wasn't there a concern that the symmetry is off a little bit now, that's sort of sticking off to the side? I mean, even though they use the same granite, it looks like an addition.
Okay.
That's the only part of the library that does. Right?
Are you speaking in the back or?
The back, down.
Yeah, I think I'm not, totally versed in the planning for this most recent addition. I think some of it was to not impact the library structure as it was. So that new addition is off to the side, and they tried to minimize the changing of the structure itself. And Diane.
In the reference room, where there's a elevator, was that
Yes.
a dumb waiter?
Yeah, it's a book elevator. I meant to mention that. Yeah, I meant to mention that because I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yes, yeah. And that's original to the library. So you heard what she said in the stack room or the book stacks. I showed you that photograph close of the view of the whole stack room. Right behind the stairway that goes downstairs is a book elevator, and it's original to the library. A couple more hands, yeah.
Do you know stair like spiral metal staircases between up to the stacks and
Her question was, there another set of stairs, like a spiral metal stairs going rotunda to the second floor? Not to my knowledge, but I don't remember any, but it's certainly possible. We don't always, especially when we're kids, pay attention, so. The elevator was added in 1994. And of course, there were codes by then that you had to have access for everyone. And that money was donated by a few individuals for the elevator. So that elevator was never there. And I don't know what was there before, if they just utilized some sort of empty space. Yes. In the stack room?
Yeah. Metal stairs, but they were spiral. They were very, very steep.
And are they still there, or was it, you're talking about a different set of, we're still discussing these stairs.
It would be from the center.
Okay,
Very much like the ones that go from the downstairs, but it's now the children's
Okay.
department up. They're very narrow, very steep, metal. I don't think-
but there's stairs that go, yeah, there's stairs still now that go up to, of course, that balcony area to study. To my knowledge, those are always been sort of like that, but yeah. Okay, and yes.
What is behind those windows that are above the front entrance? Is that one of the rooms that are open now?
Coming in the front door,
Yeah.
that window is just,
All those windows above that have the grill.
yeah, just,
Okay. That's
Yeah.
working.
yeah, and it lets in some light. Yeah. All right, anyone else? Well, yeah. Oh, did I see another hand? Yeah, look around, you'll see some stuff I haven't still seen, so I'm still looking, man. Okay, thanks a lot.